All right, I want to bring in Noncedo Madubedube from Equal Education and talk about school safety. As we were talking about earlier on, there was this incident in KwaZulu-Natal, but I guess it sparked this debate. Are our schools safe in South Africa? Let's say hi to Noncedo. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for coming through. It is an important issue. School safety should be an apex priority. Is it?
It's funny you should ask that, because we know that Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, had in fact declared school safety a priority. And then after we saw that Minister Angie Motshekga, together with her department, had also prioritized school safety. In a portfolio committee meeting just last year, in September, they were speaking about the deterrence that school safety, school violence has on a conducive teaching and learning environment. And in fact, we also recognize, and which we sort of acknowledge, that the Western Cape has also prioritized school safety. But the problem with this conceptualization, and that's why it's funny you should ask, because there isn't a budget or finance allocated to being able to meet or match that school safety is a priority. So it is a priority by word's mouth, but it isn't. Is this something that we're seeing deliberate investment in financially inside the planning of these various departments, whether it's provincially or nationally?
What makes you say that? In terms of the numbers, what is actually needed?
So this is another thing, is that, for instance, the reason I can say this with confidence is because equal education in the Western Cape has been for, I think, 4 or 5 years now, running a campaign on school safety. And we've always struggled to get access to information on how exactly the Safe Schools program runs in the Western Cape, how much budget is allocated, how much of that is used for different elements of the Safe Schools program. And it's always been difficult to access this information. So we don't have a clear understanding on how much it exists and how much it's spent and how, but we know for a fact that in the event that there are budget cuts, or in the event that there are certain things being prioritized, that school safety is by word's sake a priority, but not necessarily being awarded in a budget's namesake the same, like a substantial amount to be able to work off.
So let's look at the risk and threats. How can the risk and threats of violence in and around schools, which is important, in and around schools, be better identified and managed?
So we, at some point, I think it was it's 2015, we did a schools audit in 255 schools in the Western Cape, and we found that one of the key issues around school violence wasn't just bullying, as the Department of Basic Education will say, but it was also around the journey to and from school, where learners typically felt like they were exposed to elements inside their school community. They made it difficult for them to be able to engage in school traumas and things of that nature. So, and this is why we know that school safety isn't just a Department of Education issue. It's a societal issue. And we also know that, for instance, the South African police services are a part of the department that is meant to support the Department of Basic Education in trying to find ways to exercise some responsibility and accountability and semblance in being visible on the route to and from various schools, but also to be part or form part of the steering committees that are inside schools that are in essence called school safety committees.
I want to touch on...
We've always advocated...
Yes, carry on.
So I was just going to say, we've always advocated that school safety must be a priority, but it's an intergovernmental or rather interdepartmental sort of affair. And SABC should be involved. The Department of Social Development must be involved, because a big part of the semblance or the ripple effect of school safety inside schools is as a result of psychosocial support sort of lacking, and that's not something teachers are necessarily formally trained in as well.
The role of the police in protecting our children, I want to explore that in a short while, but I want to get your take. That's something that happened recently. The Gauteng Education Department has reportedly changed its policy on school outings following the death of Enoch Mpianzi, as you would know. Apparently school outings with boat activities must now be authorized by the department's head office. What's your thoughts on the change of policy?
I think it's good. I think it's good to respond to something like this by centralizing processes. I think it's important that parents feel at ease knowing that an HOD inside the Department of Basic Education in the province will be ultimately responsible in making sure that there are safeguards that speak to how a learner will travel from school to the venue, and if the venue has the necessary safeguards as well. Because what happened in Gauteng is absolutely, it's like bewildering. It's an actual trauma for the learners, for the family. I mean, I can also imagine for the school staff that were involved. And so I think it's a good thing to centralize that kind of system to make sure that there are appropriate safeguards and those things feature and apply across the board, as opposed to it being a per person or per school, depending on resources or like class or geography.
Yeah. You know, I alluded to this earlier this week. Reportedly, the Department of Education in KwaZulu-Natal was saying that police will be deployed to a school in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, the school was closed following protests by community members and the school governing body. And parents took issue with three teachers, saying that they made it impossible for teaching and learning to continue there. I want to get your take in terms of this. Would you support parents and the school governing body closing down a school? And I'm talking here in general, because they need to sort out certain issues that parents feel is pertinent to their child's education.
So, I mean, one thing I always say to South Africans is that schools have always been a site of struggle for South Africa, predating 1976, and we still celebrate that date today. So if parents find issue with something that's happening inside school and feel the district, the province, the HOD, the DBE, in fact, isn't being responsive, they're going to try their best measures to make sure that it isn't business as usual. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for me, because I understand that there could be a fundamental issue. I don't know what was happening with the three teachers. But at the same time, it is a bit of a shoot yourself in the foot type arrangement, because it also then means that teaching and learning can't happen for your child. And especially in a rural province where there are so many other factors that are against learners, our siblings being able to sort of achieve the best results or learn inside a conducive environment. So it's a catch-22. I find expression in people being able to disrupt processes if they are feeling unheard, but I also think then we must consider what it means to disrupt learning in a moment or in a space or in a context where learning is already such a difficult endeavor because of various other issues. There's social capital issues, there's social wage issues, scholar transport, there's infrastructure issues, the sanitation issues, the teaching and learning issues in KZN. And so I think when parents decide to take that kind of action, they must consider these consequences as well.
Look, I'm fast running out of time, but I want to get your take on this. I think it's important because we talk about parents, we talk about communities at large and their responsibility in safeguarding students, but we've come across videos that are doing its rounds on social media where you have learners challenging teachers, sometimes physically. Ensuring safety is one thing, but I guess instilling discipline is also very important. Is there enough emphasis on the codes of conduct for learners at schools?
So, I mean, my take on any policy, right, including the code of conduct, is that it needs to be informed by the people that it's for. So when you've got learners that are involved in bringing to life the code of conduct, it then becomes a culture aspect inside the school, as opposed to a book that one refers to in the event that you've transgressed. So that's the one thing about a code of conduct. It has to be informed by learners in order for it to be effective in that sense. And the issues around teacher and learner relationships having broken down is a ripple effect of society. young people, children don't relate to elderly folk in the same way that they did, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And this is a result of the breakdown of the social fiber of society and communities. And so that's why I think social development should be prioritized in going into schools and running psychosocial support for teachers to help them better understand how to relate to learners, because we're all generations apart. So there's also that aspect to it. But also, there's so much violence all around us, in our communities, in our day-to-day lives, in media, in social media. So those things will play a role inside the negotiations and engagements inside the classroom. And so we can't look at it simply. A code of conduct must be informed by learners, because they need to take ownership of it, and therefore it's an easier process to sort of undertake. But teachers and learner relationship is also something that we do need to navigate quite a bit, and social development should be at the heart of this issue. I must end off by saying there are alternatives to corporal punishment and thinking about discipline modules that are run for students that are studying to become teachers, so educators or pedagogists. And that's a fascinating way of trying to talk to young teachers about how they're going to navigate classroom and learners inside a generation that we necessarily aren't born into. Another factor in this is that where do these things happen? They happen typically in schools that are under-resourced, with a bit of an overcrowding issue where you can't pay special attention to some learners than others. So it's a broad topic, and I think it's quite complex.
Noncedo, I guess it's a holistic approach where police, teachers, government, parents and community should actively participate in addressing and promoting school safety. Thank you very much indeed for your time.